I actually have been doing a new thing lately. I've been doing a lot of writing lately, and I I was talking to my wife, and she was like, "You should take a writing class." And I'm like, "I live in Japan, where there are no English writing classes. That's not an option." So I started looking around on the internet for uh, what kind of interesting resources are there for people who have done writing classes online. And one of my favorite authors, Brandon Sanderson, actually taught at Brigham Young University in Utah for a number of years. And all of those lectures are available on YouTube for free. And I thought, huh, take a class with one of my favorite science fiction authors. Well, why not? So I've been going through the Brandon Sanderson lectures, and I don't know, halfway through his semester now. They're very good. You can find them on YouTube. Just Google lecture Brandon Sanderson. They're all there. Um, he made a point that I wanted to share that I thought was I thought was very appropriate. And he was talking about genres. And he was, a lot of his lecture is not just about how to write, but it's about how to get published as a writer. And he was talking about, to paraphrase him, write what you want to write because that's what you're going to write well. But if you don't have any reason to not write in a way that's going to make you easier to publish, don't do that. Don't be different just for the sake of being different. If there's something in your voice or that you want to say that needs to have that different voice, then do that. But unless there's a compelling reason not to, go ahead and do the things that are going to get you sold. And, there are some sort of basic things that help you get sold as an author. For instance, having a book of the right length. And there are genre conventions for this. If you are an epic fantasy, apparently, that's about 100 to 150,000 words. And if you're more than that, it's going to be more difficult to get your book published. If you're less than that, it's going to be more difficult to get your book published. If you are like a sword and sorcery style fantasy book, then the word count is lower. You should probably be under 100,000 words. If you're doing urban fantasy, modern urban fantasy, apparently those are supposed to read much faster. And because they read much faster, people expect you to have a lower word count, something like 50 to 75,000 words. And those, of course, aren't hard and fast rules, but publishers would prefer that you do that because that makes it easier for them to sell products. And I got to thinking about that in the framework of what we do here in making video games. And a lot of this, obviously not the same rules. I'm not worried about the word count of my game, but these genre conventions about what is it that you expect to see when you pick up a game. I think actually we have some of those same things. Another example that he gave that I thought was really interesting, he was talking about science fiction novels and the difference between, what is a military sci-fi novel and what is a space opera. And obviously this is the way he's broken up books and whatnot. Other people would break them up differently, but going with what he had to say, if you're in a military sci-fi novel, people want to know, how do the guns work? They want to know how, do officers behave to enlisted men in a way that makes sense? Does this match military experience? As opposed to a space opera, where in a space opera, you have a phaser, it shoots, it kills people, it's a blaster. What do you care? I don't know how this gun works. I don't care how this gun works. And those two genres are based around different audiences. Different people are reading those two different kinds of books. And if you're writing a space opera, you probably shouldn't waste a whole lot of time going into the details of how does the phaser work, because your audience doesn't care how the phaser works. The audience wants to know about the love story between the, three-breasted whore of Galacticon 6. That's what they're interested in. And so you need to tell that story because that's what your audience cares about. If you're writing military sci-fi, they want big, long, huge, detailed, somewhat realistic space battles. And you better have your shit together in how do the space battles work and how does the technology and blah, blah, blah. It's a good point. It's a very good point. And I think we have to look at that for games as well. And we're a genre game. Last Regiment is a game that fits within a genre. We are a turn-based strategy game. And I some of the people who were in this thread were there at PAX and saw the people that showed up at PAX and saw the people who played our games. And it was clear as a bell. Some people would just walk right by our booth, and they would look at us and they would be like, eh, and they would go on. And they were not at all interested in what we were doing. And then some people would walk by and they kind of slow down and they kind of give it the eye and then, and if I would go out at that point and say, hey, how's it going? They were interested. They wanted to know about the game. And I think of this very similar to if you were a bookstore and people were walking through the bookstore and they saw a romance section and they were looking for the latest epic fantasy novel. They probably would. It doesn't matter how good your romance novel is. It doesn't matter how good the cover of the romance novel is. I'm not even looking at the romance section because I'm not in the market for a romance book. I'm going to walk directly to the fantasy section. I'm going to look through the fantasy section. I'm going to find a book cover that looks like, oh, this is the kind of thing I'm into. Look, there's an elf and a dragon. And I like elves and dragons. I'll play that. That's what happens with books. It's the same with movies. If I go to a movie theater and I walk into a movie theater, it doesn't matter if the latest Sandra Bullock romance, rom-com is playing. I hate rom-coms. I'm not going to watch it. I even think Sandra Bullock is hot as fuck. And I still am not going to watch her movie because I'm not interested in whether or not she gets together with Hugh Grant at the end. That's not something I care about. But I will go see the next Avatar. I don't care how bad the reviews are. I don't care if the entire world says that the next Avatar is an enormous steaming pile of garbage. I'm going to watch that movie because that's what I'm into. And so these genre differences are important in entertainment. And so when we start looking at questions about how do we make Last Regiment better, how do we fix it, how do we improve it, what things do we want, we have to look at it within that framework. And it's interesting because we have lots of people coming, and there are people who are coming to this stream and people who look at our game and people who look at our stuff at PAX who honestly are looking for something else. They want to play an RPG. They want to play something. And they're going to have comments. They're obviously going to say, oh, well, I played Last Regiment and I wasn't interested. Well, you know what? I watched a Sandra Bullock movie on a plane and I fell asleep. I couldn't stand it. Does that make the Sandra Bullock movie shitty? No, it means I don't like Sandra Bullock movies. And so we have to kind of be in that, world. We have to be in that mental state where we're always parsing our information that way. So I wanted to share that with you. And it's something to think about when people are saying, I like this or I don't like this or whatever.